Welcome to the quick guide of getting the Mako MiniD Distortion up and running inside of Visual Studio using the project files included in the zip file out on GitHub. You're going to want to install Juce, and then you're going to want to install Visual Studio. And when you're in Juce, you're going to want to create a new project, and you'll be presented with this dialog box. And over here we have application, plugin, library, all these different types of applications you can make. We're going to want a basic plugin. I'm going to give it a name. Let's call it test 1. And I think that's about all we need to do. Make sure you have the correct exporter down here. We're going to use Visual Studio 2022. Create project. We have to give it a place to put the project. I've already created a place on my hard drive for VST, test VST directory. So we're going to select that folder. The next thing we want to do is view the properties of this project. So we can hit View, Project Settings, or we can hit this little flowery looking thing, Project Settings. And up here, that's where you can give it the name, the version, your company name, copyright, blah, 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 blah. All these types of things. Come down to plugin formats, pick all the different formats that you want to compile. Each one will probably take a little bit longer. We just want, there we go, VST and standalone. And plugin name, you can do all these types of things down here. I think that's about all we really need to do. FX instrument for the category. You can play with all this stuff. I think that's all we need to do for that. The other thing you can do is come over to this release. So when we're editing the program, we'll be in debug, and then when we create that final exe or VST, we'll be in the release. And during the release, you're probably going to want to use the runtime library, a static runtime library. I've had some issues using the DLL on one computer. Now we need to copy some files over. Right now we don't have any of the graphics files, so you'll want to go into the zip file and grab up the graphics files, and I've put them on my desktop to make it easier. So they're right here, so we're going to drag these up into this window, the File Explorer, and now they're in here. We can also then go to Exporters and click on the Visual Studio 2022 tab or whatever version you're using, and down here you can say which icon you want to use. So it'll go look at those pictures. We're going to use the MD logo PNG. Okay, now I think we're ready. Let's hit save again, save all. Okay, now this will create a blank project in that directory that we selected, but it doesn't have the correct source code files. So I've copied those down here on my hard drive. So now we need to put those in the correct place. So we now have a test1 directory inside of our VST directory. And inside of here, you'll see source code. And there's the 4 files. So tried to keep the code inside of those 4 files so that it's easy to just drop them in. So we just got to take these and drop them in here. It says, would you like to replace the files? Yes. Okay, we should be ready to save the project and open it inside of Visual Studio. We go to File, Save Project, and Open in IDE. I like to go into the shared code, test1, source, and then here are the 4 source code files. I like to open those up. And at this point, we should be able to run it. Let's hit local Windows debugger, or F5, I believe. And it will compile, and you're ready to go. Go into audio settings, make sure your inputs and outputs are selected, turn off the mute audio, and you should be ready. Let me put some sound into it, and that works. Then we can hit the test. That's not annoying at all, but it works, and we're ready to go. So The VST and EXE basically have two separate threads that are running. The processor is what actually processes the audio and makes the sounds and does all those things. The editor, of course, is just the thing that you see on the screen that you can touch with your mouse and do different things. The editor is destroyed and created and destroyed and created and destroyed and created constantly as you're working in like a digital audio workstation. The processor is always running. So these two things need to talk to each other. So I usually have some kind of like public variables in the processor that I can read from the editor. It's usually a good idea to make all your changes in the processor. It kind of depends. But you don't want to be changing settings in the middle of processing audio, or you'll have all kinds of glitches and weird things happening. So usually in the beginning of my audio functions, it will do a check to see if the settings need to be changed. Let's get our feet wet on what a VST is actually doing. It's a program that's running and it's working on audio. Audio is being sent into it, it does some work on it, it sends the audio out. We need some form of interface to talk to the VST, so that's where this editor comes in. So we have two separate basic programs running at the same time. The editor lets us adjust things, the processor does all the work. But there's also a third thing that needs to be done, and that's somehow the digital audio workstation, the program that you're using to record the music, needs to understand what is happening with all of these settings. So the way Juce handles this is you can have a control on a screen, and then you tie this control to a variable or a parameter in this case. So down here we see we have parameters. So in our plugin processor, parameters are defined, and these are all the different parameters. So we have like its min-max value, default value, and integer, float, blah, 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 blah. So we need to define all of these things. And then next we will need to go ahead and tie these to a control inside the editor. In Mako Distortion, we tie those controls to the DAW variables with attachments. These are done in the plugin editor C++ file. So here we have an array of attachments, and they're all set up depending on what type of object they are. Once your attachments are made, you will now have the ability to have information going to and from the digital audio workstation, and you then do that in your plugin processor C++ file with the get state information and set state information routines. Now that we have a way to get values in and out of the DAW, we need to actually deal with the variables ourselves. And this is done in the slider value changed function. So anytime a slider is moved on the screen, this gets called and the value then can get updated. What I like to do is make a public variable in the processor, and then I set down here that that variable has changed, so that I can go into the processor during my audio processing block, and I can say, hey, have any of the settings changed? If yes, then update all of my settings. This way I don't get any glitches or weird audio artifacts during audio playback. This is a good starting point to actually talk about how audio is dealt with in the program. In the plugin processor C++ file, there's the process block. This is where all the audio is adjusted. The digital audio workstation has buffers for the audio, and it will send them to you in small chunks. And what you do then is just loop through those chunks, those buffers. So here we're basically saying, for every channel of audio, let's loop through the audio, and then we're going to get the actual audio out of the buffer, and then we're going to go through them one sample at a time and deal with them. So here we are, we're looping through the buffer, getting a sample, and then we're applying all of our effects and things that we're trying to do to it. Since we have a fixed chain here, there's just a bunch of Boolean variables that say, yes, do the noise gate, yes, do the compressor, yes, do the distortion, blah, 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 blah. We work down through the list, and then the audio is written back into the buffer. So if you were just starting out on this and you wanted to start messing with it, you might want to come in to say like the distortion pedal, and we can go to that. Let's go to its definition, and then here's our distortion pedal. It's that simple. We apply a mid-boosting filter, we put a whole bunch of distortion onto it, and then we roll off some of the highs, and that's it. So we're reading in our sample here, we're setting it to a temporary variable, and then we do all this math to it, and then we return the modified sample. It's that simple. So here you could do some things. A lot of times with distortion pedals and amplifiers, you don't want a whole lot of low bass coming into them, so you could apply a filter here and clean this all up. You could do all kinds of things, add some compression, do whatever you want. But that's the intro to how to get into this and start modifying things